Hi everyone, I'm Pranoti, host of Under the Microscope. This series is brought to you by the Real Scientists Nano team. Our goal is to provide a platform where scientists can communicate their work and interact with the public. With that in mind, every week we introduce you to a scientist working in the field of materials or nanoscience, who tweets from the Real Scientists Nano Twitter account, which is realsci_nano.
Hi everyone, my name is Pranoti. I am the host of Under the Microscope podcast series. Well, in case you're watching on YouTube, it's a video or podcast or whatever we call it. We are talking with materials and nanoscientists. That's what is happening. And today we have with us Luis de Jesus, who is an assistant professor at the University of Buffalo in 20 minutes from New York, west of New York, which is what I've learned just before recording the podcast. So, hi, Louis. Welcome to Under the Microscope. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for the invitation, and hi everyone in YouTube and all the medias out there that are listening and seeing this video.
Excellent. Awesome. Let's get started. Let's start by understanding your research. So, Louis, could you explain your current research in super simple words to us, please?
Yeah, so the kind of research that I do is with solid materials, and all I want to know basically is how bonds change when the solid moves, basically. So there's all kinds of movement that happen in the solids. There's vibrations, um but there's one specific type of movement that is called a phase transition. And that's what happens when a solid goes from looking like a building and then now is looking like a more slanted building. The composition of the building doesn't change, but the way that it's arranged, the way that it's structured does change. And that kind of transition is important for things like batteries, energy devices. And that's something that I want to understand better, specifically on the bonds, like how those bonds, if there's any breakage of bonds and then rearrangement of bonds, like how does that look specifically? That's kind of the simple words of my kind of research.
Okay, well, that sounds really cool, and I have tons of questions for you. Let me start with the one that is just of the or like at the top of my brain while I'm understanding and trying to process what you're saying. You mentioned phase change or phase transition. Can we say like liquid to gas is also phase transition, or are we talking about more complicated phase transitions?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So liquid to gas or gas to liquid to solid, those are phase transitions,
Mm.
right? And interestingly, that's what happens. You have a gas, you have these molecules, let's say water, who are like freely moving around a specific volume, and as they start rearranging and creating this like hydrogen bonds interactions, and they start organizing, then they form the liquid, and then you can go into a solid, right, into ice. Now imagine that in ice, uh, you have another phase, which is actually something that is like understood. Like there's different types of water now. So imagine that you have ice, and the arrangement of those water molecules within the solid ice is also transitioning into another phases.
Okay,
So
that
that's
changes
basically
the
the
properties then. Sorry. Yeah.
so yeah, definitely. Like it talks about the properties, it talks about like the stability of the solid, it talks about the capacity of doing a function. Like it's completely another realm of science, of solid sciences, that
Mm-hmm.
is very interesting. Because while we are developing all these theories to understand it better, it's usually very stochastic. It's usually very random when in terms of like the way that it happens and how it happens and when it happens. So usually you need a specific type of stimuli for it to happen, and that can be stress. It can be intercalating ions. It could be like whenever there's if you take something from the macro to the nano, the phase change. That's what the phase changes happen. It could be adding temperature. Like all these type of stimuli completely make the structure rearrange, and it's mostly because of those vibrations. And so there's a phase transition that happens in the solid specifically.
Okay, and second question is, what kind of solids are we talking about here? Is it ice? Is it wood, steel? What kind of solids are we talking about?
So when we think about steel specifically, so steel is an alloy, right? It's an alloy of iron and carbon. It's a combination of it, and you do have like whenever that's one of the reasons like you want to, whenever you are making let's say a sword, you heat the sword and then you start hammering the sword. That's for two reasons. One of the reasons is to get rid of defects, and the other reason is to actually be able to get the structure that you want, because depending on the amount of carbon that you have in it, or depending amount of on the face that you have specifically, you can have something that is more brittle, or something that is less brittle. So then like those are the properties that change when you're thinking about phase transitions in the solids. Stuff like wood or ice. So wood has less transitions because you don't really like change the crystal structure of it. Like
very simplistic, like carbon and hydrogen majorly, not like iron and carbon and iron and chromium and all those things.
Exactly. So when doing my PhD, I worked with this solid materials that is used, or people want to start using it for electrode systems in batteries, in lithium-ion batteries. And so the material is vanadium oxide. So the composition is V2O5. And this has a very specific crystal structure of square pyramids organized in an up-down arrangement. Now, when lithium goes in, that arrangement changes. So you have puckering of the square pyramids. You have a complete change of the square pyramids, and that event is a phase transition. When you think about, again, like the example I can give you is like something related to when you have that combination of like water ice, like when you start like melting it, that water is not still like water, it's still like very icy. That's like a pseudo solid phase transition. You're going from like something that is well arranged and a nice structure, and then it slightly changes into another phase before it keeps changing into like other types of systems.
Okay, all right, that sounds cool. Oh my God, there are so many questions. I'm going to ask you so many questions when you're taking into account, because this is really fascinating for me. So, Luis, what can the followers expect in the week that you will be taking over our Twitter account, the Real Scientist Nano Twitter account?
Yeah, so I'm pretty much gonna be giving like a little. At the beginning of the week, I'm thinking of giving like just a story of like me as a scientist at the beginning, and how it is to become a scientist from Puerto Rico to all the way to being an assistant professor at the University of Buffalo. And then by the tail end of the week, I'm gonna start like talking about like more of like the future of the sciences that I do. And where I'm looking forward to going to.
Okay. Wow. That sounds really cool. And I am curious to know about your journey all the way from Puerto Rico to now in Buffalo, but we will get into that in the long podcast. So thank you very much, Luis, for taking the time to speak with me and looking forward to having you on Real Scientist Nano.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for listening. This is Pranoti, host of Under the Microscope. To know more about us, visit our website, thesciencetalk.com, and follow us on Twitter at realsci_nano.